Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another FlowFish video. Today we're going to be reviewing Disclosure Day. Official release day was June 13th. They were some early screenings, so I went to one earlier today. And initial thoughts, wow, just wow. My mind was blown. I had seen the trailers going into this movie, and again, it also being a product of Steven Spielberg, my expectations were high. And from what I'd seen from the trailers, I didn't necessarily put it all together, and the movie was not what I expected from the trailers, but it was fantastic. I highly recommend you go check out this movie. The characters, the plot, the story, the action sequences, some of the ideas and themes throughout this movie I thought were just magnificent. And I just have to give a lot of props to Steven Spielberg. He knew what he was doing. He knew where he wanted to take this film. The casting in the film was fantastic. Emily Blunt plays the character Margaret Fairchild, and she does a phenomenal job. I don't know if she wins an Academy Award for this performance, but I wouldn't be surprised. She plays this emotionally complex character that is going through such a difficult and crazy transition to fathom in real life. If this was actually taking place, and she plays it so well, the complexity of the emotions, the things that are going on through her, it not only makes it believable, but just empathize with her, like what she's dealing with. And if you were this person in these shoes, right? Josh O'Connor plays Daniel Keller, and he does a fantastic job. But I think Emily Blunt steals the show. She is phenomenal, above and beyond. I don't want to say the rest of the cast, but just what an outstanding performance from Emily Blunt. A lot of respect to her, a lot of props to her. Coleman Domingo plays Hugo Wakefield, which is another key character in the movie, and trying to formulate the plot and accomplish the mission that they're trying to do so in this film. I'm going to do my best to avoid spoilers, so I'm going to try and describe things, but I'm not going to be overly specific because I do recommend you guys go check out this film. I plan to do a deeper dive and breakdown into some of the stuff that took on the film that'll include spoilers, but that'll be in a separate video. Colin Firth plays the villain in this movie, Noah Scanlon, and then another important character throughout the film is Jane Blankenship, played by Eve Hewson. But man, like the movie end, the credits are rolling. I'm just sitting there and I'm just like soaking it all in. My initial, like, again, mind blown. My initial thought though, I was trying to understand the premise of the movie, I guess, right? Or, some movies have like a gimmick or the point. And I think this movie just really did a good job of telling a story and making the ending worth sitting through the story and watching the story and seeing everything unfold. And the payoff was incredible. I thought the ending was the best part of the movie because everything was building to this, and there were so many unanswered questions or bits and pieces of the story that we didn't quite get yet or didn't totally understand, and progressively as we get through the plot we're uncovering more stones, and then at the end everything gets fleshed out, and you're satisfied because no stones were left unturned. But I also think Spielberg did a really good job of not over explaining things to the audience or overloading us with too much information, still leaving room for interpretation or theorization, which is a really difficult thing to do. And I thought it was fantastic. We can come up with ideas for some of the smaller things or the things beyond the movie, but all the major questions that we wanted answers to throughout the movie were given to us, and that was incredibly satisfying. The story was interesting and productive in the idea of how it moved across and kept you captivated. But then also getting to the meat and potatoes of it all, and getting to the stuff that you really wanted to know and what we were waiting for made it all worth it. It was I'm almost speechless, to be honest with you. I showed up to the theater and I was probably about 25 minutes late. So I missed a pretty significant portion of the beginning, I think. A lot of the catalyst action. So I didn't see like the jump start of the movie. I jumped right in, not a quarter of the way, but maybe almost a quarter of the way through after a lot of these actions had taken place. So I was sitting there and focusing and trying to catch up a little bit and understand everything going on. But even then I was hooked, I really enjoyed it. It was fantastic. It reminded me of why I go to the movies, is to watch a story like this that totally captivates you, and didn't have, gosh, how do I describe it? Didn't have like a sappy ending or a silly moral, just a really good story, but also some room for interpretation and room to theorize about, what do you think it actually meant? Go a little bit beyond the surface level of what actually happened and what the ending was and what they were trying to do. And boy, I just loved it. I really did. I really did. The synopsis for the film, again, not trying to expose too much here, is a meteorologist and a cybersecurity expert find themselves at the center of a movement to expose the government's cover-up of extraterrestrial secrets. And it's just crazy, man. It's such a crazy story. So interesting. The actors do a fantastic job throughout it all. Just wow. Like, all I have to say is wow. I honestly want to go back and rewatch the movie and watch it again to take it in again and have the experience, as well as maybe, see some of the stuff I missed at the beginning. But, dare I say, I think it's the best movie I've seen this year. I think this movie should win some awards because it was fantastic. I truly enjoyed it. I really, really enjoyed this movie, and I really recommend you go check it out. I think in the synopsis, and again, not to spoil anything, they're trying to expose some secrets, some government secrets of, extraterrestrials. So let's leave it at that. And, one of the characters throughout the movie finds himself having all these answers, but not the right answers to the questions they're looking for, or a reason, an understanding of how they're acquiring these answers. I think the actor does a really good job making us sympathize and feel for the character. And me trying to dive a little deeper and understand it, I think it's something that can be related to all of us. Is we have these ideas or these different answers to things in life, but they're not always the answers that we're looking for, the answers that we need. And it can be incredibly frustrating to feel like you have this information to help you with things, to do things, but it's maybe not applicable to your situation or helping you in the way that you hoped it would or want it to. Or, you have answers, that you have information, but it's not the information that you're looking for, the information that you want at this time for this specific scenario, right? And I just thought it was incredibly interesting. I think one of the biggest themes of the movie was the idea that knowledge is power. Again, they're trying to expose a secret and share it with the mass public. And, it makes you wonder. I think, well, two things. I think, A, it reminds you how important knowledge is, especially when you think about the idea of, in early stages of humanity, education was not as widely as available as it is now. Or even, in the United States, in many countries, it's a requirement for children to get an education before they reach adulthood, and they can make their own decisions to continue an education or not. But knowledge is power, and how important it is to know things and have access to this information. But I think the other one is how many things are we not aware of in our lives? How many secrets is the media keeping from us? How many secrets is the government keeping from us? It's silly things, but how many secrets are our parents keeping from us, right? Like, it's just a really interesting idea and concept to think about and explore. For a silly example, right? Most of us grow up believing in the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy, and we grow up and we learn quickly that these were not true things. And obviously the reasoning behind them, the intent of these lies is not to harm us. It's to, make the world feel magical and give you a childhood that your parents had, or, make you feel like a kid. But how far can that be taken sometimes? It's a little simple lie like, oh, the tooth fairy will give you $5 when you put your tooth under your bed, or, hey, you need to get this job because this is going to make you all this money, or you need to go to college because that's the only way you can make money in the world. Like, and I'm dramatizing things a little bit here, right? But my point is, the lies can be incredibly detrimental and the truth can hurt. Right? One of my favorite sayings in life is the truth hurts, but at least it's true. And when something is true, you can do something about it, or you understand it fully, versus having false information that if you try to do something with, you're not dealing with accurate information, or B, you're just getting lied to in order to not do something about it. I just think it's very interesting, you know? It's certainly one that makes you think a little deeper if you're thinking to that point. But I was trying to, if I know Steven Spielberg, which I don't personally, but he is an incredible director, has made all these great films. I know there was some hidden meanings behind some of this stuff, and I think that was one of them, you know? Especially when this movie revolves heavily about government secrets and trying to expose them to the public so other people are aware of this information because of how significant it is, right? You have to wonder, like, what is a deeper meaning behind that? And I think it's the idea of knowledge is power, and people should have access to knowledge and be aware of things. At one point too, the characters are debating whether they should leak this information, right? So there was some political tension going on throughout the story as well. So one of the characters argues with everything going on in the world and this information being made aware, it would break things. People would not be able to comprehend or live with this knowledge. It would destroy the world. It would corrupt humanity. It would break down the organization and systems of humanity. And that may be true. That may not be true. I think humans as a whole have difficulty with change sometimes, or a lot of times, I should say, right? So something that is so groundbreaking as this can be pretty difficult for people to come to terms with and accept. But he also argues, who are we to decide if the information is good or bad, or how it'll impact us? It's right for people to know about it, and they make their own judgments, they make their own assessments about it. One of her counter arguments is, what gives you the power to make that decision for people? And it's not so much that, and it's a valid argument, to be honest, like, but again, at the end of the day, I think, putting the value in the truth and in the knowledge, and it's something that's so significant that people should know, they should have that information and then decide how they want to proceed with it. It's just incredibly interesting. Just wow, it really blew my fucking mind. Really, really blew my mind. Just a lot of props to Steven Spielberg. A lot of props to the actors in this film, especially Emily Blunt. She had an outstanding performance. Outstanding. The music was scored by John Williams. A huge fan of John Williams. I think the music helped make the film too. I remember towards the end, and as we're building through these things, the intensity of the music and the feeling that it gave you, I just felt chills up my spine and just felt so captivated by it all. It was phenomenal. It was really fantastic, and it was just interesting to see how the story of these characters trying to get this information out, what it took, the sacrifices they had to make. A couple of the twists and turns along the way, and the things that we didn't necessarily foresee. But the impact of what they did on the people and the public, and how important it really was for people to know about this stuff, I think is something that's incredibly, overlooked in real life, but something they really did a good job of demonstrating in the film. Is information should not be proprietary or privatized. It should be accessible to everybody, and that's the part of human free will, is our ability to choose what we do with information. That doesn't mean some people won't do bad things with information, but that also doesn't mean there aren't good people out there to do good things with information. The information itself is not good or bad. It's what people choose to do with it is what makes their act, is what determines the actions and the validity of it. Knowledge or physical things are not inherently good or bad. It's what people choose to do with them is how we categorize whether it's good or bad. If somebody takes the cure for cancer and makes it, widely and cheaply available to the mass public, that's a pretty good thing, versus someone who finds the cure to cancer and hides it and keeps it away from people and uses that as an opportunity to make more money from treatments that are less successful. It's probably a bad thing. But the cure to cancer itself is not good or bad. It's what somebody chose to do with it. Their decisions they made and the actions that followed are what make that idea good or bad. But people knowing that there was a cure to cancer out there is something that people should be aware of, right? And that's kind of a good simile for this movie, I think, or a good metaphor for this movie, is the idea that there's something out there that people, somebody could utilize for good things, or people could utilize for bad things. But if it's not shared with people and people don't know about it, then people can't make their own judgments or assessments, or at least be aware of the truth of it. I think I believe another theme in this movie, which was very interesting was, again, the character Margaret experiences this ability to overload herself with information, and it overwhelms her and makes her, it impacts her emotional state of mind and her ability to process these different things, and also just kind of go through the story that's taking place and get to where they're trying to get. And I thought that was a good metaphor for how we live our lives day to day. With smartphones at our hand wherever we go, with screens wherever we look, with news, social media, television, all so widely accessible and bombarding us with information. It can be difficult. It can be overwhelming to deal with all these things. And I think a lot of us discredit the idea of how it can impact us emotionally. And this situation was certainly different to our modern lives, but I thought it was a really good simile in the idea that we have access to all this information on our fingertips, or it's just so openly and widely accessible that we can be overloaded with information. We can have too much information, and it can stress us out, and it can dysregulate our emotions and not allow us to make us or feel the ways that we want to feel, but also it can give us answers to things that we're not really looking for answers to, or give us all this information that we think is helpful. But when we turn away from it or look elsewhere, we're still looking for information that we don't quite have yet. Or we have this information, but we have no purpose or direction with it. And I think it was an incredibly interesting concept. And I think incredibly relatable to modern day society through what this character was experiencing firsthand in this movie. So I really think there were some interesting themes in this movie to be explored and discussed, and things that are very relatable to real life. That being said, I'm going to wrap this up a little bit here. I appreciate y'all tuning in. My score for the movie Disclosure Day is a 9.3. I truly think this was a fantastic film. I think it was engaging, it was captivating. I thought the music was fantastic. I thought the performance of the actors was great. I thought the plot was really good and made sense. I think maybe there was a couple things that I was iffy on or didn't quite get. I shouldn't say get, but I think you could argue against. But overall, I truly enjoyed it. I loved it. I think one of my favorite things was trying to dive a little deeper into some of the themes and the meanings behind everything that took place in the movie and how it can relate to other things in our lives or outside the events that took place in the movie. And I just also think the premise of the movie, focusing on this information and the light that gets shined on it at the end of the movie, was incredibly satisfying and worth the payoff and really emotionally invoking. So again, I give a lot of credit to Spielberg, to all the actors that worked on this film, all the producers, writers, costume designers, anybody and everybody who worked on this film. I give you guys a round of applause. Like, really great freaking job. A lot of respect. A great freaking movie. I hope you guys get some rewards and notoriety for the piece of work that you put together, because it was truly fantastic in my opinion. That being said, guys, that's going to be the end of the video. I believe I'm going to try and do a deeper dive into the film with some spoilers, so be on the lookout for that and check that out. But thank you all for your time and watching this video. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.